The thoughts, views, and comments expressed by Sidebar, its guests, callers, and advisors are not necessarily those of the management, ownership, or production unit of ILS Verizon Media Group. Sidebar, a 103.5 The Beat podcast, is a production of ILTV Studios and may not be reproduced or represented, in part or in its entirety, without the express written consent of Verizon Media Group. Sidebar is the intellectual property of Verizon Media Group. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved.
Welcome to Sidebar 103 The Beat podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. And as we wrap up 2025 and go into 2026, I thought it would be really cool to just take a look back on all the crazy things that we said in this show and the parts of it that were your favorite moments. That's not going to happen because that's a lot of editing, and we're almost at 100 shows at this point. So yeah, that's not going to happen. But what we are going to do today is 2025. This is the last show before the new year, and I think that we should take this time to figure out, what are we going to be doing next year? Not as a show, I mean as a people. Like, what's the plan? What's going to make 2026 any different from 2025? Don't get me wrong, congratulations. We made it through 2025. And some of us by the skin of our teeth, some of us, through hard work and effort, some of us by just sheer luck or whatever. But 2026 is approaching, and I feel like we should have a game plan. So what exactly is the game plan for 2026? What are we going to do to make 2026 a better year than 2025? And I wish that it was something straightforward and simple as saying, okay, we all are going to agree to do this exact specific project, but everybody has different goals. Everybody has different needs. Everybody has different desires. When you really think about it, because there's somebody who's listening to this who they want a new job, but there's somebody who wants a job. They'll be happy for any job. There's somebody who wants no job at all. They're tired of working. They want to be able to just exist. And that's a fair enough point. So what is the project that we can all work on individually as well as collectively that will take us forward? And it's always going to be collectively, because if you're listening to this, that means that you're most likely in the Bahamas. And if you're in the Bahamas, then congratulations, you're a part of the group project called the Bahamas. That's whether you are a citizen, resident, or a visitor who for some reason decided to listen to local radio/television. I mean, hey, knock yourself out. You're part of this collective project. It is your moral duty to make the Bahamas as better as you can make the Bahamas better while you are in the Bahamas. We'd like it if when you leave the Bahamas, and this goes for everybody, that you still attempt to make the Bahamas better. But while you are here, it is your moral obligation to make the country a better place. And so the question is, what is the plan? What is the way forward? How do we all get on the same page to make that happen? And so I realized that then means it's most likely not going to be a literal, tangible thing. It's going to be more of a philosophical thing that is going to make the country better, it's going to make us better, that is going to be something that we can all say, yes, this is what we should do, or this should be the plan for 2026. All right? I know that some of you are listening and saying that there are people out there who have nothing to contribute, that the best thing that they could do for the country is for them to cease to exist. I won't call their names, but you know them inside your heart, and you might feel that way about them. But everybody has something to give, and everybody has something that they can do. But with that said, I think that we would be disingenuous if we didn't accept the fact that there are people who are not on the same page as us, who are not hyped to make the dream of the Bahamas a reality, to not make the Bahamas better. And they don't want to make you better, and they don't make anything else better. They're fine with the way things are because, you know, their life isn't so horrible. It works out for them. And so I'm trying to figure out, because I've been thinking, like, what is the best way to phrase this? Because we can phrase this one of two ways. We can phrase this like our favorite first century socialist, Jesus Christ, out of love and kindness, or we can phrase it like, I mean, you guys like fascism. Let's not pretend. And Bohemians love fascism. We were tricked very early on. As a sidebar, I know people who are named Adolf, and I know people who are nicknamed Hitler, and I know somebody who is named after Stalin. Because we just love an authoritarian figure so much that there are people in this country named after, whether nicknamed or legally, after great dictators. And I use the word great with italics around it. And nobody thought it was weird. People was like, well, he was a powerful man in 1930s Germany. You might as well. Yeah, that's who you are. You're kind of a Hitler. You're the Hitler of agriculture. That's a weird thing that somebody would think is a compliment. But we do love fascism. So I also could phrase this as a fascist. But I do realize that in thinking of how to phrase this, that the appeal of fascism is because while it is often used for destructive methods and destructive means, in the same way a dictator is, the first set of dictators weren't seen as bad things because it was assumed that this person had moral character. So there is something about a person having almost absolute power to do the right thing that could be a good thing. The problem is most human beings are horrible people. And so if you give them absolute power, they will not do the right thing, and they also will not relinquish the ability to continue to not do the right thing. But with that said, perhaps the best way to communicate the thing, the project, the idea that we should move forward into 2026 with, the plan. And I don't anticipate that in 1 year we'll have it all figured out. But this will get us closer. Who is your friend? That's how Jesus would say it. Who is your neighbor? And then for those of you who are like, another lovey-dovey conversation with Steve and Hanna, who is your enemy? I think that's what we should focus on. And so today we're going to talk about how do we figure out who is actually rooting for us and who is rooting against us and who are we rooting for and to what end. And once we figure that out, that's going to put us in a better position to move forward in what we do. Whatever our individual goals are, whatever our collective goals are, once we figure out who is on the side of us, then we can move forward. So we're going to take a quick break. I know I don't usually take breaks, but we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get into the discussion. You are watching and listening to Sidebar, a 103 The Beat podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sidebar, a 103 The Beat podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We are talking today about what is the plan for 2026? What do we, or what I think that we should be working on in these last few, I mean, at this point it's hours, I guess you could say days, but hours before 2026. In the last few hours of 2025, what should we be working on so that we can make 2026 a better year, and therefore we will be a better Bahamas, we'll be better people because of it. And I've come to the conclusion that part of what is stopping us, and I'm not coming to this conclusion alone. One of the things that I think we can all agree on is that the Bahamas, our native tongue is not English, it's complaining. When you see another Bahamian, the easiest way to start a conversation is to complain. All right? You say, oh boy, it's raining. Oh, this rain ain't coming nowhere. Oh, the sun hot. Oh, it's so windy. Oh, it's so cold. Oh, it's so hot. Like, there is no good. And occasionally you'll buck somebody and say, oh, I can't complain. And often my response to them is like, you could, you're just not trying hard enough. The native tongue of the Bahamian is to complain. We find commonality in complaining about things. And, that is definitely a symptom or a result of being oppressed and repressed and colonialism and all that stuff. But that's not the point. The point is, in our complaining, we are often drawn to this idea that the issue, or one of the biggest issues in the country, is the government. No matter what, the government, and I'm using the government broadly, it doesn't matter who it is. The government could be the PLP, the government could be the FNM, and those are the only two who've ever been government in the independent Bahamas, so those are the only ones I'm going to reference. But there will be complaints that the government isn't doing enough. And sometimes the complaints may seem warranted, may seem legitimate, when you think that the government is overspending on something that is needless, when you think that the government has abandoned a group of people or an area of the country, an industry is being neglected, where they're making life harder for the average citizen. There are legitimate reasons why one might complain. But then there are times where there aren't legitimate reasons for one to complain. and that the complaint is actually coming from somewhere else. You know me, road guy like me. There are times where, and I've been accused of being an apologist for the government. And I wish I was an apologist for the government. There are things that are happening in the country and we're blaming the wrong person. And so you say the government is your enemy and you don't look at the government as a friend to work hand in hand with. And here, don't get me wrong, the government is made up of individuals, and in the same way, there are people in your family who are horrible people and you wish you wasn't related to them and you don't tell people that you're related to them in public. There are people in the government who should not be in government. But then there are people in government who are doing their best. If we take it away from the elected officials, we take it to something like education. In any school, you're going to have at least 3 types of teachers. You're going to have the teachers who this is a passion. This is something they've always wanted to do. They have been trained and groomed from when they were in grade 7 to become teachers. They come from a long line of teachers. Their grandmother was a teacher, their mother was a teacher, their aunts are teachers, they are now a teacher. They have only ever wanted to be a teacher. They don't have any other dreams and aspirations. And when they get inside the classroom, they do their endeavor best to pour into students. And they go above and beyond, like, I'm going to make a difference. And their students, years, decades later, are like, oh, Miss Roll, Miss Williams, Miss Williamson, Mr. Green. The students remember them because they had such an impact on those students. They're those teachers. And then there are teachers who realize if I become a teacher, the Ministry of Education will give me a stipend while I'm in college, so I don't have to look for a job. And then once I graduate from college, I will be whisked away to a sure job, because you're always going to need teachers, because teachers are always leaving because the job of education is so difficult. And then they're not necessarily good teachers. Matter of fact, sometimes they're horrible. Sometimes they were horrible students. I have met teachers while I was studying English who plagiarized their essays, and they are now in the system teaching English comprehension to students. They couldn't write their own essays. They were trying to pay other people to write the essay. I've met those type of teachers before. And then there's the third kind that's like, I'm going to do my best. I'm doing this. This is not my only option. I do have other dreams that I can fall back on. And so those teachers, when the system isn't set up to support them, after a while they say, why am I doing this? I could work at a bank and make 8 times as much as I'm making off the bat. Why am I doing this? I could go work for myself and make 8 times as much as I make here. Why am I doing this? I could pick up garbage on the side of the road and probably make 8 times as much as I make as a teacher. It would not be fair to classify everybody in education as bad based on the people who could stay, could leave, and the people who are horrible. You don't say all teachers are our enemies, or this is all the teacher's fault because you've encountered a bad teacher. The responsible, the moral thing to do is to figure out which teachers is there hope for. And this is as a parent. This is as a community individual. You say, okay, this teacher is at this school that is servicing the students of this inner city. I'm going to go to them and say, hey, what do you need to make your life easier as a teacher? Let me invest that in you. And even as a parent, it's like you show appreciation to the teachers that you know are going above and beyond, that are helping your child and are doing things to help your child. The teachers that don't care, you can't hold that against all the other ones, because now the entire system is going to crumble, because there is no infrastructure to say, okay, we will continue to support. Let's work alongside the ones who are doing things. So now let's take it to the bigger look, right? I'm going to talk about roads because I happen to have more information on roads than other things. So you say, oh, I noticed that this road is paved, but this road was recently paved and something's wrong with it. And as many times as the Ministry of Works has stated that one of the things that is going to cause roads to decay quickly is flooding in roads. We have persons constantly building, whether it's private property or commercial property, they're building it higher and letting the water run into the roads. They're not having adequate drainage. They don't clear their drainage. Another thing is, if your garbage is in the road, that's going to cause not just the drainage to be blocked off, but also these people driving around with all type of rock and stone and sand on the back of the trucks. This truck was not made to carry 2 tons of sand, but you decided I could be cheap and I could carry it on my pickup truck, sand falling all over the road. This causes friction. You start eroding the road because now there is, I want to say aggregate. Anyway, you got rocks and cement and all type of stuff falling in the road. And these things are causing the road to dig up sooner than it ordinarily would. It's applying additional pressure to the road that shouldn't be applied to it. You shouldn't be 16-wheelers going through side corners. Shouldn't be no big Mack trucks going through side corners. These are things where you see it and it is impacting your quality of life. It is costing the government money, but the government doesn't actually exist because the government is just you, and it's just us. And so it's costing us more money. And so now we have to keep on repaving the same road. We're wondering why there's hole inside this road over and over again. And let me give you another example. You might say, I've never seen, well, I live in an area where we don't have garbage blowing all over the side of the road. The people who get building material in my neighborhood, they're rich enough to have the actual proper trucks bring it with a tarp over it. We don't have those issues. All of the people inside my area and all the stores in my area, they have proper drainage. There's no grass growing out of the drain, so I know that it's proper. Their parking lot is not filled with potholes because their parking lot doesn't flood and then run into the road, causing potholes around the road. None of that is the issue. But I still feel like the government isn't doing enough. And once again, I'm just going to keep it in infrastructure. The government isn't doing enough for infrastructure. The government isn't doing that. Let me ask you a question. Do you know anybody who drinks and drives? You might say yes, you might say no. But here's the thing what people don't think about. Every year, the government says, we think we're going to have this much money. And out of this much money, we will assign this much to education, this much to health, this much to tourism. It all comes from tourism, but this much to tourism, this much to works, this much to environmental health, this much to, and pass it around, right? The majority of the money in the budget, it goes towards paying salaries. We cannot not pay people unless we decide to live in a world where if you work for the government, you get everything free. You get a free house, you walk into the food store, you pick up as much groceries as you want, and you don't pay for it, you get free gas. Unless we decide to live in that world, you have to pay the employees that work for the government. So all the civil servants need to be paid. And once again, that's one of those things that, as a sidebar, you can complain about that all you want. I'm not going to fight you on that. The rest of the money is like, okay, education has this much money outside of paying salaries to do this stuff with. So that might be upgrading one of the institutions in a way so they have more technological advancements, whatever, right? Healthcare might need a new building, a new machine, a new something to buy the pharmaceutical products that it needs so it doesn't run out again, to replace the ambulances that are run down, whatever it is. Each ministry does their own thing. But that ministry is given a set amount of money. So what happens? Let's say, hypothetically, Ministry of Works allocated a certain amount of money. This is what the amount of money you have. And within that fund, you say, okay, we plan to pave this many roads and do this with the roads and get it done in this amount of time. We also have to pay outside contractors and material and all these different things. Everything is set. This is a great plan. We got it. And then somebody at 1 a.m. in the morning decides to speed down East Street and Soldier Road and knock down a $50,000 light pole. And then a week later, somebody decides to speed down East Street by the junction by Dunkin' Donuts and knock down that stoplight. And then maybe a couple weeks later, somebody knocks down another $50,000 junction box. These are things that we don't make and that need to be replaced. And while we may have one on hand, it may be one that was intended to go somewhere else. So now we have to buy another one to replace that. And so suddenly, you're short $50,000 here, $20,000 here, $10,000 here, because you had to go buy something else to replace something else. You say, oh, well, we don't have to replace all the stoplights. Yeah, we do. We do have to replace the stoplights. Once again, this is all hypothetical. I'm speaking hypothetically. But hypothetically, if people keep damaging infrastructure, driving off, not checking, in 2025, how many times have you driven past a stoplight and then 12 hours later you come back and it's completely demolished and destroyed because somebody drunkenly just swiped it down? And then less than a couple days, it's replaced. Those things cost money. That money has to come from somewhere. And here's the thing, the roads will be paved, but now they can't be paved in the same expediency because while a pothole may damage your tire, which it's only doing that because you're speeding, but while a pothole may damage your tire because you're speeding, a pothole is not going to kill you. You know what will kill you? When you are driving on a dual carriageway and somebody speeds through it because they're like, oh, there's no light there, let me hurry up across, and they write your car off with your child inside it. So we have to replace the stoplights. And so now we see where someone's selfishness is actually impacting you violently and is also stopping your quality of life from progressing. But you don't see a new stoplight and say, government hard at work. What you see is, oh, this pothole is still here. The government don't care about me. So now you have to ask yourself the question, is the government, in the wide grand scheme of things, your enemy or your friend when the problem that you see has not been corrected with the expediency that you would like, but the problems that you ain't even notice have been corrected? The same thing applies with every single ministry. There are things that are happening where it's like, hey, we would like to get wait times at BMH down to not 18 hours. My God. Anyway. However, the air conditioner is still working. So small small baby steps. If the government, I'm not even going to actually say the government is your friend. The government have to be your friend. But if the government is not your enemy, and you are willing to work with the government, the same way you would work with a teacher that is teaching your child, you say, let me buy something for teachers' appreciation so they can know that this parent support them. You don't have to go out for drinks with the teacher. You don't have to go paint the teacher house. But you support them. That is the same way you can do it for the government. You pay your taxes. You try your best to not curse out civil servants when they are having a bad day. And then when you have the opportunity to speak to someone who has the power to do something to move it forward, you bring up your issue, but you don't throttle them for the pothole when everything else is not falling apart. I'm very passionate about the potholes. Anyway, whole point is, I probably should have never talked about potholes. Potholes are a thing. You have to ask yourself, are they really my enemy? Are they really the cause of all the issues that are in my life? Or are my issues coming from something else? Is this frustration that I feel coming from somewhere else? Are they actually doing things to improve my life? And I'm either not noticing it or I'm brushing it off and saying, oh, well, that's your job. And that's a question that you have to answer. I mean, I can attempt to push you in a direction, but like I said, everybody in the government isn't a great person. Everybody who works in the government isn't a great person. And of course, if you say, well, the government is trying, you sound like a government apologist, you sound like a sycophant, you sound like a suck-up. But in the words of Christ, when John the Baptist was around, he didn't drink, and it was like, oh, he's a weirdo demon. He don't drink and he don't have fun. Jesus comes by, sit down and drink with the publicans and the sinners, and they say, oh, he's a drunkard. You can't win. It's about how much you're willing to lose. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dive into another sector of society that you have to ask yourself this question about. You are watching and listening to Sidebar 103 The Beat podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Paradise Premium Foods, where exceptional taste meets everyday convenience. Right in the heart of Hurricane Hole Plaza, whether you're planning a beachside brunch, an intimate dinner, or simply restocking your favorites, we offer only the finest selection of local and imported goods, handpicked for quality, freshness, and flavor. At Paradise Premium Foods, shopping is effortless, service is personal, and every visit feels like a treat. From gourmet meals to go to organic essentials and indulgent treats, this is your neighborhood market elevated. Live well, eat better. Discover Paradise Premium Foods, now open at Hurricane Hole Plaza, Paradise Island. Paradise Premium Foods. Taste the difference.
Welcome back to Sidebar 103 The Beat podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. Today, as 2025 wraps itself up, thank goodness, right? I will look forward with hope to 2026. I'm asking, what is the plan for 2026? I'm making the suggestion that in our planning for what we want and what we wish to accomplish in 2026, we should put on the board figuring out where our problem is actually coming from. Who is actually our friend? Who is actually our enemy? And I mean, I had intended to just go down the list of institutions that people often complain about, because you have people who will say the church is the problem. All these churches, we have as many churches as we have liquor stores and number houses. They are on every street corner, and they collect as much money as the other two. But yet, we see people with mental health issues, see people being poor and destitute and dirty and despised and despair. And you say, what is the church doing? But at the same time, there are churches that if it were not for them, we would have descended into complete chaos and anarchy. There are churches that are the only reason that some people have clothes on their back. There are churches that are feeding people, that are a part of literally feeding networks, that are constantly feeding people day and night. Well, day, they're not usually open at night, but they are constantly making sure that people have food in their pantry and making sure that people have a hot meal in the daytime. You know the ones. I don't want to call the wrong names. And the issue is, of course, once again, it's not a monolith. So it's not so easy to just say, oh, the problem is this. The problem is these people. The problem is those people. The truth of the matter is, there are probably more churches doing good than these legacy churches that people only go to because it makes them sound cool to say, oh yeah, I'm a member of this church, I'm a member of that church. My church doesn't have windows, we just have lasers. There are more of the churches that are feeding the poor and clothing the sick, offering education. Good God, the Catholics had it right. Anyway, offering education, healing the sick, offering healthcare, offering health services. There are more churches doing the right thing than churches that are clearly money grabs, trying to exploit persons who are desperate for hope and redemption in this terrible, terrible world that we live in. And then there are people like me who often complain about businesses and say, well, you know, the majority of our problems are the result of big business in the Bahamas. Big business, they make or break the country. They decide what happens, the price of your food, what sort of things can come in the country. They threaten to shut down the country unless the government allows them to charge more for anything. It could be fuel, it could be food, it could be medicine, it could be anything, right? There's always this threat looming in the background with big businesses where it's like, oh, well, if we're not allowed to do this, you'll see. And that's how I feel personally. But at the same time, there are businesses that are pouring back into the community. There are people who, they're medium rich. I'm going to give them a little blind. And they don't have to allow their businesses to be used as a platform to help poor people out. They don't have to give back anything. Can some of them give more? Yes. But I'm going to give them a blind. These are, unfortunately, now don't get me wrong, some of these businesses are your enemy, all right? And what you should do, and this is a sidebar, the next time you go into any business, all right, you got to treat them with the same level of disdain that you would treat the government. When you walk into a government building, you look around and you look at the ceiling tile and you say, oh, that's black mold up there. And you cough a little bit. And you say, oh, the air condition, there's something definitely wrong here. My nose started to run the minute I walked in this building. I started coughing a little bit. There's something in the air ventilation system. This is a problem. You go to the front, the person have a poor attitude at you. You say, boy, these people at this place, something's always wrong with them. I want you to treat private businesses with that same level of disdain. Now, you don't have to go on the radio and complain about it because they're very litigious, all right? And so if you do that, you say, this store or this gas station or this pharmacy or this mechanic shop did X, Y, and Z. If they're big enough, they're coming to get you, right? And then any radio station will be like, oh no, we're a commercial radio station, which means that we're run by commercials. Therefore, if you say anything against any of our advertisers, we're more likely to get rid of you because the advertiser is the most important thing at a radio station or a television station. So I'm not asking you to go call in, but I am asking you to complain vehemently, to constantly say, hey, why are there so many birds inside this food store? Is this rat droppings in this food store? This food store has everything expired at the same price on the shelf here constantly. That's just an example. It doesn't have to be a food store. It could be anything. But you need to treat private business with the same level of disdain and entitlement that you treat the government. Because at the end of the day, in a small, closed society like ours, they are an agent of the state. They actually collect taxes on behalf of the government. They, theoretically, some of these private businesses only are able to exist because of the massive contracts they're able to pull from the government. Therefore, if they work for the government, they technically work for you. But that's neither here nor there. The whole point is, you got to hold them to the same level. If you walk into a private business, it could be a doctor's office, and you're like, wow, that water stain on that ceiling tile doesn't look like it's just water. That looks like it might be something else. I think you're putting your employees at risk. You got to treat them with the same level, but that's not the point. The point is, we may look at businesses and say, the businesses, they're not doing enough. They might be our enemy. And there are gas stations that I don't go to, out of principle. There are food stores I don't go to, out of principle. I don't like the way they treat their employees, and I don't like the way they treat their customers. They're not mechanic shops. I just try not to go to Bush Mechanics. But the whole point is, I have no issue if you think that these people are a detriment to society and you wish to remove yourself as much as possible from participating in the destruction of society with them. If you view them as your enemy, that's fine. But I dare say, there might be somebody greater than the government, greater than the church, greater than the businesses. Oh, and telecommunications. Anyway, shots fired everywhere. There may be somebody who is a bigger potential enemy to your, not just survival, but your thriving in this country that you should interrogate. There is someone that if they were your friend, your life would be easier. But because there are times that that person is not your friend, because sometimes that person is selfish and is only looking for the immediate gratification of the moment, or childhood trauma, they're just looking for acceptance by society, and so they're doing things that they really shouldn't. That person is the person that you need to interrogate. But that person is the hardest person to interrogate. As we walk into 2026, you got to ask yourself, is this person my friend or my enemy? And the person is you. Now, don't get me wrong. Big business can be out to get you. They could figure a way to price you out of everything. 1 second. They can price you out of everything. Big business might buy up everything. The government or members of the government may forget to even hail you until it's election time, which, by the way, next year is election time. So now you start seeing people who you haven't seen in years. Sometimes you don't even see them in Parliament. And worse if they didn't make it in Parliament. Because now you wasn't even in Parliament. You had all type of free time. And now I just seeing you because now you're trying to get back in. Boy, these people. Anyway. When you are your own enemy and you are unwilling to accept that and you are unwilling to do the work to stop that, when you are unwilling to do the work to befriend yourself, you're going to find yourself in harder and harder situations. You're going to find yourself, it is easier to blame everybody. And don't get me wrong, the food that we eat is giving us cancer. The materials being sold to us is giving us cancer. The jobs we work with hazardous material in certain environments is giving us cancer. The immigration policies that are being put in place or have been put in place that is greatly, it's speeding us to a genetic bottleneck that is, it's already giving us cancer, but it's definitely going to increase the likelihood of us getting cancer. All that stuff is true, but then there are choices that we are making that we also know will give us cancer, and we choose to make them. There are choices that and the thing is like, but if you already have a chance of getting cancer, if it's 10% here, 10% there, this person selling you a sandwich made completely out of bacon, and so that increases your chance of colorectal cancer. And now this person over here, you're not really sure where their oil tank is hidden, and is it leaking? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. They're not doing best practices. So that's upping your rate by 10%. And then you go to work and the air quality is weird, and that's 10%. And it's 10% here and 10% there. Why are you adding another 20% to that likelihood? You know what I mean? And that's just in the case of cancer. But there are things that we're doing to our own detriment. We're not friends to ourselves. And if I'm not a friend to myself, if I don't trust myself, if I don't do the hard work to better myself, I know that you have no reason to believe that I'm going to do the hard work to make life better for you. So therefore, you have no reason to trust me. And that is what has really been holding us back. Because the truth of the matter is, if all of us got together, there is nobody who is in this country who is rich by the fact that magically they didn't fall in a gold mine. They didn't discover oil. They're rich by the collective sum of little dollars everywhere, right? So if I get $1 from this person, $1 from that person, $1 from this person, at a constant rate, I can become a millionaire. I can become a multi-millionaire. That is the power of the collective. We have that power. The government is the manifestation of that power. The roads happen because of the collective power of the 10 cents on every dollar that all of us give in VAT. The schools are repaired out of that. The doctors are paid out of that. The police are paid out of that. We buy the bullets. That is our collective power at work. I mean, there's also revenue from other things. But for the point of this, we're simplifying. We can do that as well. But the problem is, if you do not trust the integrity of the individual, and whether that person is yourself or whether the person is a family member, then we cannot collectively join together to make it happen. Because you could have $20,000, which that's a lot of money, but you could have $20,000, you still can't buy a house. You could have $50,000, you still can't buy a house. But now, if you have $50,000 and your brother have $50,000 and your cousin have $50,000, and y'all actually trust each other enough to be like, okay, this first one is yours. Next year, we get mine. Next year, we get Jim. If you could do that, that's a different life. But here's the thing. One of the reasons why we don't trust other people is not only we see how they don't trust themselves, but we know that if we were in the position, we wouldn't do the right thing. And if we wouldn't do the right thing, we assume that that person cannot be better than me, so they definitely ain't gonna do the right thing. Anyway, before I go on a rant, the point is, as we look to 2026, and we make our plans for 2026, and we work on this group project of the Bahamas to make the Bahamas better in 2026, we have to ask the question, is this person my friend or my enemy? And we must ask that of ourselves every day before you make a decision. And of course, that will slow down your productivity and decision making, but perhaps that's for the best. You wouldn't spend as much money on Shein and Amazon if you have to ask yourself the question every time, is this a purchase that an enemy would make, or is this a purchase that a friend would make? But you have to start asking yourself, is this choice, is this decision, the decision of my friend or my enemy? And once we start making decisions for ourselves as friends, then we can start making decisions for our family as friends, for our friends as friends, for our community as friends. Yeah, but what do I know? Anyway, that's the thought. It's been a great year. I look forward to next year. We'll be indoors more. Last of this, outdoor winning, horn blowing stuff. But anyway, this has been Sidebar, a 103 The Beat podcast, powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. True God still.
So you want a space, but not just any space. Your next event to life. So what do you say? Do you want our space?